Hello, I am Professor Kino and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be talking about... I never thought I'd live in a world where there was a Hollywood live-action Detective Pikachu movie. I had always thought that Pokemon films would be relegated to animation because, one, there have been a ton of Pokemon animated films, around 20-something of them so far, and two, none of them have been super amazing. Guilty pleasures, yes. Works of brilliance, not so much. So I never thought that a Hollywood studio, where anime manga projects seemingly crash and burn all the time critically and financially, would be willing to spend $150 million to produce a Pokemon film as obscure as Detective Pikachu. But Warner Brothers has proven me wrong, and here we are. We can now go to the movie theater and see a big-budget, live-action Hollywood Pokemon film, and I love that fact. So the only question that remains is this film actually any good? Premise. After Tim Goodman travels to Rhyme City, a utopia where humans and Pokemon live together in harmony, in order to deal with the disappearance of his father, Tim teams up with a Pikachu, a lightning-controlling rodent that he can miraculously understand, in order to discover the fate of his father and unravel a mysterious plot that jeopardizes the existence of Rhyme City itself. Writing. A lot of this film relies on prior knowledge of Pokemon. What they are, what they do, what types there are, how they interact with the world, etc. And if you know the answers to these questions already, then this film was made for you. If you've played the games and watched the shows, this film really doubles down on the lore from them. However, instead of focusing primarily on the battles between Pokemon trainers like the latter do, Detective Pikachu focuses on the world of Pokemon. What it would look like for the day-to-day people, how Pokemon and humans would coexist in the same city. And this film is marvelous at depicting this. One scene in this film reminded me a lot of the Zootopia scene when Judy Hopps arrives in Zootopia and we see how all the animals live with each other. It's the same here. When Tim arrives in Rhyme City, he sees Machamps directing traffic around sleeping Snorlaxes, Squirtles assisting the fire department, Loudres acting as beatboxers in raves, Granbuls and Growlithes backing up police officers as police dogs, Jigglypuff singing in clubs, Rattatas sneaking around alleyways, and even more. For any Pokemon fan, the imagination put into this film's world building is wondrous. However, for anyone who thought that these last few sentences were mostly full of gibberish and nonsense words, this film may be a little off-putting. This doesn't mean that if you don't know anything about Pokemon then you won't have a good time. I think you can enjoy this film no matter who you are, but if you are a fan, there is just so much more on display for you to appreciate. And while overall Detective Pikachu does assume that its audience knows what Pokemon are at this point and does not slow down to make sure that everyone is on the same page, it does a solid job at not leaving any of its audience members in the dust. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the general story is rather simple. It's your basic unlikely hero, missing person, evil conspiracy gumshoe storyline. There are clues, there are leads, there are allies, there are enemies, there are some slight twists, and there is adventure. It is nothing really new. In fact, the plot is very similar to another film that came out a few years ago, but I won't say which for spoilers' sake. And because of that, I more or less guessed this film's conclusion pretty quickly. Similarly, the characters themselves are nothing to write home about. The greedy corporate entrepreneurs, the up-and-coming journalists looking for a first big scoop, etc. They work for what the film is trying to accomplish, but they are not amazing. But this is all okay because it makes the ridiculousness of this film's setting and world more easily digestible for the people new to it. And while in the end this film is just a cute, cozy, and simple affair, that's fine because it works. It doesn't delve into the full potential of the Pokemon brand, but for a movie with such a strange premise like this one, to have all the pieces fall into place nicely is quite an admirable achievement, and it makes for a fun time. Acting. The work here is not Oscar caliber. The primary two human characters, Tim Goodman played by Justice Smith and Lucy Stevens played by Catherine Newton, are both good. They can sometimes overact scenes and feel very young adult, and sometimes you can tell that they both find it difficult to work opposite the CGI Pokemon because their hand motions and eye contact don't always line up with their adorable screen partners. But it's not bad in any way, just good. However, Smith does do a fine job at balancing this campiness and slight jankiness with some pretty powerfully acted emotional scenes. I actually felt bad for Tim because of Justice Smith's performance. In addition, there are 3 other human characters that deserve recognition. Karan Soni, who most will recognize from Deadpool 1 and 2, plays Tim's childhood friend Jack. He doesn't make a big impression, but it is a fun nod to Deadpool because, I'm just going to assume, he probably landed the role here because of his professional relationship with Ryan Reynolds, who produced this film. Also, Ken Watanabe makes an appearance as Lieutenant Hyde Yoshida. He doesn't give a super powerful performance either, but it fits nicely, and Watanabe is always nice to see. And lastly, I wanted to mention that Bill Nye is in this film as the wealthy Howard Clifford, the visionary behind the utopia that is Rhyme City. Well, he does ham it up a little. It is Bill Nye, come on. Just his presence is enough to warrant excitement, which is why I thought it odd that he wasn't part of the ad campaign for this film. And finally, the only Pokemon that needs to be discussed, because he's the only one that speaks English, is Ryan Reynolds as Detective Pikachu himself. I wasn't sure if he'd just come off as a PG Deadpool, but I don't think he does. It is clear that Pikachu is Reynolds, and his role as the cute wisecracker here is similar to the vulgar wisecracker that is Deadpool, but Pikachu is definitively different. While he does sometimes inch his foot dangerously close to crossing the line, he does maintain on it, and thereby comes off a lot more lovable and charming. He does good here and in many ways carries the film because of his endearing adorableness. Costumes, hair, and makeup. While the costumes might seem merely fine to the uninitiated, I really liked how the film captures the feel of the clothes from the shows and the games. From the colors to the hats to the makeup, the characters, namely Tim and Lucy, look great. I mean, they're wearing stuff that I've seen on Pokemon protagonists for decades now, but this time in live action, and I loved it. Set design. Rhyme City is wonderfully imagined. I already described the way the sets utilize the Pokemon in the writing section, but it is worth reiterating. The film uses the Pokemon and their individual talents wonderfully in order to showcase how they would fit into our world. Like how water Pokemon would help with fire, sound Pokemon would help with music, fighting Pokemon would help with traffic, etc. It's just beyond wonderful, and the city's design itself is also wondrous. I have seen some people describe it as being very Blade Runner, but I think that makes Rhyme City seem too dark. Blade Runner is very gritty and filthy. Rhyme City does have neon lights and a noir-esque atmosphere, but I saw it as being more of a Neo-Tokyo. Shiny, clean, futuristic, but not too futuristic, and just a pleasure to look at. I thought it looked gorgeous, and if a city looked like it in real life, I think I'd move to it ASAP. It's fantastic. There are also a few other sets outside the city, such as a town, a lab, and a forest, and while they all do seem like they are part of the same world, despite them having different feels to them, they are not as spectacular as Rhyme City itself. Choreography. While Pokemon became popular because of Pokemon battles, hell, that is the foundation of the games, this film features surprisingly little action. While there are a few Pokemon battles throughout the film, and they are all wonderful and utilize the powers of the Pokemon involved excellently, they are few and far between. The primary action scenes here are chase sequences, and they are good and, again, use Pokemon abilities nicely, but they aren't really the highlights of this film. This may annoy some Pokemon fans, but I appreciated the focus on the world as opposed to the fighting, as I imagine PETA did as well, given their history with the Pokemon franchise. Cinematography. Okay, so the cinematographer of this film was John Mathiasson, and if you don't know that name, you will definitely know the movies he's worked on. Gladiator, Logan, Mary Queen of Scots, King Arthur Legend of the Sword, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., X-Men First Class, etc. So long story short, this film looks good. The way that the Pokemon are framed really showcases their varying sizes and looks, and the way that Rhyme City is filmed makes it look like a living, breathing city. The cinematography is not a jaw-dropper like The Revenant or something, but everything is done perfectly here, and Mathiasson has even come out and said that the movie was filmed on regular film as opposed to digital film, which is even cooler. Again, it's not stunning, but it does look damn good, and strangely, feels like a futuristic video gaming anime, but in all the best ways possible. Editing. While it's nothing too fancy, the editing does a good job at cutting around and keeping the core mystery intriguing. A few times throughout the film, Tim and Pikachu are able to witness footage from prior events using fancy technology, and while it wasn't all down to editing to make them as crisp as they are, some editing was involved to make the sequences seamless, and that is what most of the editing is like in this film. Flashy? No, but competent and creative? Most assuredly. CGI. The CGI is extensive here. How else are you going to make a live-action Pokemon movie on a manageable budget? And while none of it is realistic, it all does look oddly good. Each Pokemon feels so much like a slightly more lifelike version of their cartoon game counterpart, and despite them all looking very cartoony and anime-like, they fit most of the time with everything else on screen. This doesn't stop them from feeling CG, but I actually didn't mind that fact. Being a fan of the games and shows, I'm glad the filmmakers kept the original designs of the Pokemon because we've now seen what happens when a film tries to make a cartoon character realistic. Spoiler alert, it doesn't look great. Sonic. Music. While this film's soundtrack is not the epicness that is the soundtrack of the first Pokemon animated film, then again it's hard to beat a 90s soundtrack that features the likes of Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, NSYNC, Billie Piper, and a killer remix of the Pokemon theme by Billy Crawford that features a surprisingly fantastic guitar solo.
Gotta catch her.
Hell yeah. This film's soundtrack is pretty good. It feels a lot like a mix of the classic games with a dash of classic detective songs, a pinch of futuristic Neo City sounds, and a whole lot of wonderment. It never takes over the scenes it's in, but it is definitely an element that makes the movie so much fun. Direction. I think it's safe to say that director Rob Letterman is a fan of 90s pop culture. With so much 80s nostalgia going on nowadays, seeing Letterman move forward to the next decade with the likes of Goosebumps and now Detective Pikachu really is a breath of fresh air. And what's even better is that it is clear how much Letterman understands these products. It would have been so easy for him to make a throwaway Pokemon film that just does the basic stuff and does it dispassionately, but Letterman instead made the creative choice to move forward with a Detective Pikachu story, and do it in a way that not only feels like a homage to classic detective stories, but also a great encapsulation of the phenomenon it's based on. And being a kid born in the 1990s, I salute Letterman for that. Thank you for capturing the pop culture of my childhood with passion and respect. My enjoyment. I remember going to the movie theater with my brother and grandma back in 2000 to see the third Pokemon movie, the one with the unknown, and it was a wondrous experience for my 5-year-old self. I got a special promo Pokemon card, the theater was almost empty besides for my family and 2 other folks sitting in the back, and I remember having a great time. I don't remember any details from the film, mind you, but the experience itself is one that has sat with me for 19 years now. And while I can't say that Detective Pikachu has left a similar impact on me, I am happy to say that I did enjoy it. The whole experience started with me receiving 2 special promo cards, a Detective Pikachu and a Morlul card, and the whole theater was filled with people my age, and the whole experience felt like a nostalgic romp with a group of moviegoers who grew up with and were influenced by Pokemon. Yes, the film doesn't perfectly capture everything that this worldwide phenomenon has to offer, but what is here is cute, funny, and filled with an obvious understanding of the material. And for that, I am grateful and ecstatic to be able to say that this film met my expectations nicely. Recommendations. This film is primarily for Pokemon fans. If you grew up with Pokemon, or maybe only recently got into the craze, this film was designed for you. But even better, it respects your love of the product. And this is a rarity and something that I think needs to be supported. But if you are still out on the fringe of this phenomenon, this is a solid stepping stone into it. So if you've been interested in checking out what this whole 20-year-old pop culture staple is all about, this film is a good place to start. However, if you are not really interested in being bombarded with dozens of new creatures with wacky names and powers without much explanation as to what they are and what they are for, you probably won't get much out of this film. Because Detective Pikachu is not Pokemon for dummies, but a celebration of Pokemon and the deep influences it has made on our worldwide culture, all wrapped up into a simple and adorable gumshoe mystery. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to add anything, feel free to comment. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.